Okay, you're right. Welcome to your video tutorial. Today we are looking at simplifying ratios. Remember, a ratio is a comparison. How much of this do I have compared to how much of that do I have? Okay, in a similar way to fractions, ratios are simplified by dividing each term by a common factor. Okay, so we're going to look at some ratios now that we know their comparisons. Now we know how to work them out from last lesson. We're going to look at simplifying some of them. Okay, simplify the following ratios. 7 is to 21. So for every 7 parts of something, there's 21 parts of something else. Okay, 7 is to 21. Now I'm assuming a few of you are sitting there and can see the common factor. I can say for every 7 parts there's 21, but there's also a number that's common to 7 and 21, and that's 7. 7 goes into 7 once, and then goes into 21 3 times. So I can say for every 7 parts there's 21 parts, or I can say the same thing, or an equivalent ratio, which is for every 1 part there's 3. Okay, let's have a look at B. 450 is to 200. So that's saying for every 450 of one thing, there's 200 of the other. Okay, now that seems like a little bit of a bigger number. It seems a little bit hard. So let's look at a number that might go into them nicely. 100 doesn't go into 450. 25 could, yeah, 25 could. Let's see if there's a bigger one. Maybe, 50. Okay, so 50 goes into 450 9 times. And 50 goes into 200 4 times. Okay, so I can say for every 450 of something there's 200, or a more simple way I can say it, for every 9 there is of something, there's 4 of something else. That's simplifying ratios. So let's look for the highest common factor amongst my two numbers. Okay, it gets a little bit more tricky when we want to simplify fractions. When we're simplifying fractions, what we're actually looking for is a denominator to be the same. Then once the denominator's the same, the fractions are both in the same form, and I can just use the numerator. Let me show you an example. It's saying for every 3/5 of something, there's 1/2 of something else. Now, I can't compare these two fractions, and we know this from our study of fractions, because that has a denominator of 5, and that has a denominator of 2. No can do. So I have to have them having the same denominator. And I can have them having the same denominator. What's the lowest common denominator with 5 and 2? So what's a number that 5 goes into that 2 also does that's the lowest possible one? Well, 2 doesn't go into 5. 5 times 2 is 10. 2 times 5. Okay, it's going to be 10. So this is going to be, what did I do to get from 5 to 10? Well, I timesed it by 2. And if I times the bottom by 2, we know what we do to the top. We times the top by 2. Okay, what did I do to get from 1 over 2? Well, what did I do to get from 2 to 10? Well, I timesed it by 5. If I times the bottom by 5, I have to also times the top by 5. Okay, so that becomes 5. Now, 6 over 10 in comparison to 5 over 10. What I actually do now, rather than writing it as a fraction, because they have the same count of parts, I can actually just compare them like that. Okay, I don't have to actually write them as a fraction. I can just write them as the numerators were. 6 is to 5. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is find the common denominator, which has to be the lowest possible one. Okay, and then you can just use the numerators as your comparison. This example in B, we know whenever we get a mixed numeral, we have to convert it to an improper fraction. So 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7 on 3. That's converting mixed numerals. We should know how to do that. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 1 is 5 on 4. Now that I have them in fraction form, all I have to do is find my common denominator. So what's the lowest common denominator, or the lowest common multiple amongst 3 and 4? Well, 4 goes into 4 ones are 4, 4 twos are 8, 3 doesn't go into 8, 4 threes are 12. 3 goes into 12. Awesome. So it's going to be 12. What did I do to get from 3 to 12? I timesed it by 4, and I times that by 3. Okay, so if I times the bottom by 4 on this fraction, I have to times the top. If I times the bottom by 3 on this fraction, I have to times the top by the same thing. So that becomes 3 times 4 is 12. Okay, 7 times 4 is 28. 5 times 3 is 15. And a fun little reminder, we don't write it with the fraction. We simply write, rubbing out here, 28 is to 15. And that's it, guys. That's simplifying ratios.